I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that we also have to look at the bigger factors, that students are coming out with larger student debt that they have to repay. Figures of 30 to 40,000 now aren't unusual, so that changes the affordability for them buying houses. The second fact is that they have far more mobility in jobs. They're tending to start their careers later. So all these are a factor. So I don't think it's a bad thing that we've got a larger number of people in the private rented sector. And neither do I think actually it's an entirely negative picture for them going forward. I think more of them will come into the home ownership sector. Home ownership peaked at something like 68%. Under Margaret Thatcher, it's now fallen back slowly to around just over 60%, 61 or 62%. So it's still enormously popular. I believe surveys that ask renters would they like to own a property still come back with a resounding positive that they would. So I don't think all that's lost. It's tougher, but I do think that more people will find a way of buying a home than we possibly think, just later in life.
Andy, do you feel sorry when you have kids coming in their 20s and 30s that are living with mum and dad and struggling hard to deposit that and even be able to afford a mortgage?
I think lenders do have a sense of responsibility in terms of trying to support whatever government initiatives are out there. And I think something like the Help to Buy schemes, where you quite rightly said that over 80,000 people have benefited from that. But lenders, I think, can do more. And certainly if you look over the last sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, increasing loan to values is a classic point. More innovation in terms of how you help these people that are in a very challenging situation.
I suppose the danger of a loan to value, we're talking about 95% in some cases now. We get back to the Bannon days, which some people say precipitated that whole mess in the first place. Hasn't the sort of new rules on mortgage applications tightened that up?
They have. Since MMR was introduced in April 14, lenders are constrained by making the decisions based on affordability, and I think that's the right thing to do. So long gone the days where someone would come in and say, can I just have 6 times my income? And that was it. No, you'll find that most lenders have credit scorecards, they'll have algorithms behind to make sure that the people that are applying for the mortgage can actually afford it. And built within those models are stress levels whereby we increase the interest rates as well.
What's the age profile within housing associations?
We house people of all ages, to be honest, but predominantly young people under 40, certainly in our properties, and then we've got quite a big stock of elderly persons accommodation. So I would guess probably under 40 and over 65 really will be predominantly.
Are they with you and happy, or are they frustrated owners? What's the score on it, or do they just accept that this is something that?
I mean, we do have very high satisfaction rates from people living in our houses, but I think many would aspire to home ownership at some stage. But for many it's just totally out of their reach really, and will always be so.
I suppose given that aspiration and given what we were saying earlier and you all assented to it, you can understand from why the Conservative Party would say, well actually you've just nailed it on the head. Why shouldn't somebody be able to buy and own their property?
Well, I would encourage them to buy a new property or another property somewhere else, so that they move from their existing home, which is a precious resource, and that can then be re-let. I think that yes, they should have that aspiration and be able to aspire to ownership, but perhaps through shared ownership or other initiatives in a new house or other property. So supply is increased, and social housing, affordable housing remains as affordable housing for the next generation.
There used to be a scheme some years ago where tenants were given a deposit to free up the house and use that deposit towards buying a home. Wouldn't that be a better solution?
That would be a great idea, actually, Michael. Yeah, very, very good idea. Yes, there was. It was a very small initiative, very little money, but yeah, I think it has the seeds of a very good idea.
Labour is talking about banning what they call rip-off letting fees. Currently around £600. How's that going to affect the market? How's that going to affect you?
Yes. Well, this is a highly emotional subject, and this is one which has been driven by Citizens Advice and Shelter, who've both had a lot to say about it. And it's absolutely true, Richard, that I think there are a small number of estate agents, letting agents in Britain that have a lot to answer for very, very poor practice. But what we must just simply look at is this, that there is work to do when you rent a property. There's a check-in fee, there's a referencing fee, keys have to be cut, referencing has to be done, and someone's going to pay for that work. So whether that's works paid for by the tenant, which we call tenants' fees, or whether this is paid for by the landlord, somebody's going to pay for the work. Now, as you know, in Scotland they've banned fees to tenants. All that has resulted in doing is that the costs of that work has been transferred to the landlord, and in return the landlord has increased the rent to cover the increased costs. The bad news to the tenant is that the tenant now pays that increased rent in perpetuity, or at least for the length of the lease, and all that is doing is forcing up rent. So sadly, the only net winner really out of that movement is the landlord that receives more rent. So although I absolutely understand the argument, and I would stamp out the bad practices, I'm not sure banning fees to tenants is quite the solution that it is, I think so, yes. And it has unintended consequences, unfortunately.
Stephen, what about the idea Labour's also talked about creating a national register of private landlords, which should, force the bad guys out? Do you think that would work? And who's going to run it? How much is it going to cost?
Well, I mean, who's to run something like that? Doesn't seem to be many bodies to step forward and put their hand up to expend money on that. But Michael's absolutely right. Small number of rogues have brought the industry into disrepute. I would say that the reason that Shelter and others and Citizens Advice bring forward these proposals is because the industry hasn't actually set its own house in order, and it's a bit of a disappointment, I have to say, that, and apologies to our hosts this evening, but estate agents by and large and lettings agents haven't actually driven the rogues out. I've had two sons through university, one currently at university. They have been subject to the rip-off fees, unexplained charges late in the day for properties that they want. And when I know how much the cost of, for example, a tenant's referencing actually costs compared to the charge that a lettings agents in the back street of Cardiff may charge, you see that there is money being made nefariously, I would say. So something needs to be done about it. A register would help. I would still worry that there'd be, if you like, a shadow market of people who don't go anywhere near those and who would still end up with some of those horror show houses in multiple occupation that you see scattered across London and most of our major cities at the moment.
Labour's also talking about 3-year tenancies,
that's
a ceiling, or what they call, but don't actually detail, excessive rent rises.
Personally, I think both of those things are a good idea. Nationwide, probably the most enlightened building society allows buy-to-let landlords to have 3-year assured tenancies. Whereas many people say there's no demand for them. There's no demand because people know that they're generally not available at the moment. We would say that if you want people to build communities in the rented sector, you've got to allow them to stay in there longer than 6 months.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Steve said. It is absolutely right. The mortgage works will allow 3-year tenancy, and it's popular for those people that want it because it gives them security.
And I think it helps.
I can tell you that the popularity of longer-term lets is definitely becoming more common. So they are tending to extend out from 12 months to 2 years to 3 years, and this is often because of schooling for children and people wanting to have more stability.
So that's a natural progression that's going anyway. So
yes, I don't think probably the politicians need to interfere actually.
No, I think the average tenancy is somewhere between 3 and 4 years anyway across the UK. So,
but you are the only major high street lender that will allow a 3-year tenancy at the moment. Other lenders need to follow your lead on that, I would say.